Florida Senator Marco Rubio joined Governor Ron DeSantis on the campaign trail for a rally Thursday. Rubio, who is seeking a third term in the Senate, decried Democrats, blaming President Biden and his party for inflation and a host of social ills. Rubio warned that continued Democratic rule would lead to continued economic pain and urged them to help give Republicans the majority. Rubio is currently beating his Democratic challenger, Congresswoman Val Demings, in most polls. He has consistently maintained his lead throughout the campaign, though not to the extent that DeSantis enjoys over his own Democratic opponent.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that chant. I appreciate the Marco. Please don't say the polo part. I hate it. Traumatized as a child. Listen, this is a very impressive group of folks, a great crowd here today because it reflects what we're seeing everywhere we go. We're seeing it in the early voting. We're even seeing it in the mail ballot returns. And I know we're going to see it on Tuesday. And what we're seeing is a surge of Americans, including many Democrats that have joined us, who want to save their country from lunacy. From lunacy. I've been involved in a few elections now and then, both supporting myself, of course supporting myself, but other candidates in the past. This is one of the easiest ones I've ever been involved in for the following reason. The most important question you have to answer in any election is, well, what's the key issue? I get asked that all the time, as you can imagine. And I said, the key issue is this. The key issue is this. The same people are controlling the White House, the Senate, and if they remain in power in Washington for another 2 years, they will destroy this country, and we will not allow anyone to destroy the greatest country in the history of the world. So I had a journalist, you say this to a journalist, the journalist says, well, that's a little harsh. So you think I'm harsh? You should see what they say about us. But that's not harsh, it's the truth. And they say, well, let me prove it to you. I said, first of all, let's talk about just the last 22 months. Well, the last 22 months. If you look at where we are today, remember the famous Reagan story, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Really, the question, well, are you better off today than you were, 22 months ago? The answer is, of course, no. Unless you live in one of these COVID cities, at least you can open your business now because they had shut you down. We didn't have to go through that in Florida because we have a great governor and a great state legislature. But what's happened in 22 months? The first thing is everything costs more. Everything. You read these people. I don't watch a lot of the financial channels, to be honest with you. I don't watch a lot of it because I think they don't. America is not the American economy is not the stock market. We have a stock market. I'm not saying it's unimportant, but the American economy is what small businesses and everyday people are doing all the time. And they talk about inflation like, oh, the latest report came back 8. These are not good numbers, guys. 8% inflation. That's a bad number. But the number that matters to me, the first thing I always ask is, no, tell me what's the inflation on the necessities, like the things you have to have just to survive. So, for example, food. You know what it is in food? 22%. I don't have to tell you that. You go to the grocery store, you buy things that cost a lot more than they used to, if you can even find it. By the way, I don't know if this is still happening. But there was a time where they were putting like the meat inside of almost like a locker. Remember, they were locking it up like razors at CVS? By the way, that's the most annoying thing in the world. You can't buy a razor in America anymore. You got to ring the little bell. Nobody shows up for like 2 hours. It's like, I'm surprised we're not all walking around with these huge beards. But I guess you could join one of those things online, the shave club things. But going back to the meat and everything being locked up, not only is there shortages. By the way, there's still a baby formula shortage. We just get numb to these things because it just keeps happening and happening. We're going to talk about why in a moment. But everything costs more. 22% food inflation. 22%. Now, I know that for one of these laptop liberal vegans that wants to eat algae burgers or whatever they eat, maybe that's not a big deal because I guess algae is cheap. But for a working family that has to put food on the table, that's a 22. People see it every day. You see they're buying less. They're trying to make it work. That's just food. Now, what about the price of gasoline? And that's the one that's interesting to me because they're like, whoa, what can we possibly do about it? Well, I'll tell you what you could do about it. You can produce the 1 million barrels of oil a day that more than we used to produce when Trump was president that they're not producing. So Biden goes on these temper tantrums about the oil companies. Listen, I'm not a fan of oil companies. I'm not against them. I'm not for them. They're oil companies. That's what they are. They drill for oil. So he has told the oil companies, he said it when he was president, I'm going to put all you guys out of business. I'm going to put you out of business. He's basically implied oil companies are no better than cocaine cartels. You're evil. You're destroying the planet. So this is their message. You're evil. You're destroying the planet. I'm going to put you out of business in 10 years, but I need you to produce more oil right now or I'm going to... And they're like, well, you're going to put me out of business. It's not just pumping the oil, by the way. You got to refine it. No one puts oil in the car. It's gasoline. They've closed refineries. They're not building new ones. And why are they not building new ones? Because it takes like 10 years to make back the money that it costs to build one. And if they're going to put you out of business in 10 years, you ain't going to make the money back. You know who does have refineries? Take a guess what country in the world leads the world in refining surplus capacity, meaning more refining. They have more refining capacity now that they're not using yet. That's a mix. No, it's not Luxembourg. Somebody said Luxembourg. Not Monaco. China. It's China. It's China. Green New Deal China, right? They're into the batteries. They're going to do windmills. They're going to do all that. That's all we read about because they're communists, so they control everything that the narrative is. And we've got people like John Kerry that want to do a climate deal with them. So you keep reading. The guy never goes away, John Kerry. I think him and Charlie Crist might be the same person. I've never seen them together in the same room. I've never seen them together, so, I'm just saying, I'm not starting a rumor. I'm just making an observation. But John Kerry wants to do this deal with China because he did such a great job with the Iran deal that I think let's put him in charge of like the global deal on the environment, right? So China, he loves China. China's going to be this great new deal thing that they're going to do with the green stuff. They are building more coal-fired plants than every country in the world combined, and they're funding them all over the planet. And they have this refining capacity. And here's what burns me about it. So we have this strategic reserve in this country because when I was 3 years old and 4 years old we had, and 2 years old, so I don't remember it, but I've seen the pictures. We had these long gas lines and the oil embargo and OPEC, and people had to live through that. So they said, what would be a good idea if we had a bunch of oil and we stored it somewhere as an emergency? And they created it for an emergency like a future oil embargo. They never thought the oil embargo would be us against ourselves, but an oil embargo. And then they said, or if there's a war. Well, Biden has depleted it. He's been using our oil reserves down to the lowest level since the early 1980s because he thinks the oil reserves belong to him and that they exist not just for wars, not just for oil embargoes. He thinks we have oil reserves for midterm elections. And so now we have the oil, but the oil has to be refined. So who do you think is going to have to refine that oil? Who has the excess capacity? So think about how crazy that is. And then, on top of being mad at the oil companies, understand we are sitting on a bunch of oil. We have it in this country. He's demanding that Saudi Arabia produce more oil. Because here's the thing, I never knew this. Apparently, they believe that Saudi Arabia oil is good for the environment. American oil is bad for the economy, but Saudi Arabia oil. So I have a plan. I hate to say it publicly because I'm afraid it's going to get out. I'm going to say it. Here's my plan. We produce American oil, but we put a sticker on it that says made in Saudi Arabia. And Biden will get confused, and he'll say, this is good. Look. What do you think? I don't know. I don't know if it'll work or not. It doesn't hurt to try. We're going to try, and we're going to see. But anyway, so the bottom line is we have, by the way, the heating oil costs, we're not going to have to deal with that here. Okay. Maybe, how many of you are originally from the Northeast and places that were like, oh my God, look at that. Well, there you go. But you know that in the Northeast, the heating costs, you may take it for granted here because we don't really deal with that. Here's an aside. I love using these because I also like campaigns are for two things. One is to win and make sure the right people, and the other is just to air grievances, sometimes unrelated to politics. So here's my second. Florida has some of the worst cold weather fashion on the planet Earth. Some of the worst. Okay? So, and I'm from South Florida, so here's how it typically goes. Bundle up tomorrow. This is the weatherman. Bundle up tomorrow. it's going to be nippy in the low 60s, right? So you're like, all right, and listen, I've grown up in Miami my whole life, but I travel, I go up north, and not at the DC's like Minnesota or anything like that. Not that Minnesota's cold, guys. But I love Minnesota because I won the primary in Minnesota. These are some of the best people on the planet in Minnesota. And they've all moved to Florida, so that's great. But so it 60 degrees is going to be nippy. All right, so you know what's coming. You know, next thing you get out in the morning and people are wearing these jackets, and these jackets didn't even look good in the 70s, but they really look bad now. All right, but they're doing it, and it is what it is, you know. So then it says, no, tomorrow it's going to be really cold. Emergency conditions. It's going to be in the 50s. And then here come the earmuffs and the gloves and people wearing Arctic gear, and face masks and all that. And then it gets into the 40s and low 30s, and it happens from time to time. If it really pushes all the way down, it gets probably the further north you go a little colder. And then you have this phenomenon that I hadn't really seen, and I've lived here my whole life. I hadn't seen it until about 3 or 4 years ago. I wake up one morning, it's cold. I mean, even for normal standards, it's cold. And for whatever reason, it feels colder when it gets cold in Florida. But it's because you got to bring out that space heater you haven't used in 4 years, and you're just hoping it doesn't ignite like an electric car because you can't put it out, Just like an electric car, if it catches fire, you can't put it out. It's an eternal flame. So we bring out and I walk out in the morning, and early I had to go somewhere, so it's 5:30, so it was like the coldest moment of the day. Maybe it was like 39 or 40, rare, but it happens. And there's iguanas and lizards laid out everywhere, and I'm like, honestly, I went on an app and I searched. I said, I've read Revelations a few times, but is this one of the apocalypse signs? I didn't know if it was one of the signs of the apocalypse was like, a mass of dead iguanas. As it turns out, they're cold-blooded animals. If it gets cold, they pass out, they fall off the trees. But I did freak out a little bit freak out. And when I saw it, I hadn't seen that before. And in any event, so that was my pet peeve. But these heating oil costs are going to eviscerate the Northeast. 500% increases again, because we're going to have it. But here's what will affect us: diesel. No one thinks about diesel. Diesel fuel is what goes in the trucks that bring all the products. So if it costs more money for that truck to bring the product, the price of that product is going to go up. But all of this is a result of this lunacy. We're not going to drill for American oil. And so they'll argue, oh, you got all these leases. What they don't tell you is these radical groups, these crazies, they're crazies. These are the people that block traffic. They do that. These are the people that are now going to like art museums and throwing spaghetti sauce on these works of art. Look, I'm not anti-art. I don't understand it. This is what I know about art. The weirder it is and the deader the artist is, the more it costs. That's what I know. But they've defaced these things. Some of these people they tried during the NBA playoffs last year to glue themselves onto the court. And I'm going to be honest, I'm going to confess something. I was hopeful they would succeed because I just wanted to see what would happen. Like, do they play around them? Do they sweep them off? How do you get a guy off the floor if he's glued himself? One guy ran out with some smoke bomb a couple weeks ago and got, knocked out by one of the players. People, we should press charges. Like, what are you doing on the field with a smoke bomb? How does he know what that is? These people are crazy. And they set the agenda. And the agenda says, you can't. We're going to take you to court, we're going to sue you, and we're going to tell banks not to lend you money. That's another thing, debanking. They want all these people to not even have bank accounts. So the result is we're not producing energy, and the cost of everything's going up, and that's fueling inflation. The other thing that's fueling inflation is supply chain. Listen, it was stupid. It was a dumb decision to decide we don't need to make anything in America anymore. Let's make it in China. It's cheaper. It's cheaper until no one else can make it. Then they can charge you whatever they want, or they can cut you off. And that's what they do today. 88% of the medicines that we rely on come from the active ingredients from China. And the list goes on and on and on. We've got to bring American manufacturing back because we can't ever be a country that depends on other countries. And so the supply is limited because of oil, because of the lack of manufacturing. The demand went up because they lost their minds, poured $1.9 trillion into the economy of borrowed money, juiced up demand. Even Obama's economists said, don't do it, it's going to cause inflation. But Joe Biden and those, oh, no, inflation, you're lying, it's transitory. Then they first said there's not going to happen. Then they said it was transitory. Now, who he blames it on? Probably MAGA Republicans, whatever that, that's his latest catchphrase. I think somebody sat him down and says, this is the trick. Go around and convince everyone that there's this evil group of people called MAGA Republicans, and they're responsible for everything. So anyway, they do all this, and the result is inflation, a disaster. That's just part one. Part two is the border. The border is, this is not even immigration. This is mass migration. 5,000-6,000 people a day. Now, according to the border czar, Kamala Harris, of, the border czar says, oh no, the border's secure. The border, not our border, but she claimed 6,000 people a day are coming. Listen, this morning before I came here, I always go to the spot, and the reason why I go there is because you hear everything. It's this Cuban spot in South Florida, and the people behind the counter, and so the people that are buying, and it's just a real world, and you pick up so much. And one of the guys comes up to me and says, you know what we got to do? What's happening now is people are bringing their relatives and they're paying these traffickers $8,000 using Zelle and whatever those things. Think about it. So it's created a whole new industry of human trafficking and drugs pushing into our country. And these people think it's all under control, and they're inviting people to come that way. They're inviting it. Because today, if you cross the border, all you got to do is say these magic words about that trigger amnesty, that trigger asylum, and they give you a paper. Called a notice to appear, or a promise to appear. You promise to appear. So this is true, guys. This is what happens. I want you to understand what happens. You come in, you do the magic words, they give you the promise to appear, and they ask you, what is your mailing address? So understand, these people just came from like 18 countries away. Everything they own is in a backpack, and you're asking them what their address is. So obviously the logical answer is, well, I don't have one in America yet. I just got here illegally, as you know, because I turned myself into you for this paper. And they're like, well, we'll just write, and they make them up. They literally make up an address. And so we have this huge surge. And so they say, well, don't worry, it's only 1% of them have a criminal record. And I think to myself, well, what criminal record? So 1% based on the criminal record keeping system of Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico, the Venezuelan regime. I don't trust their criminal record keeping. But if it's 1%, then that means over the last 22 months, over 45,000 people with a criminal record have entered the United States unlawfully. You think about it. Over 4.6 million people have entered the United States. That's 4 times the size of my opponent's congressional district. 4.6 million people. That's what's happening every day, and they're allowing it, they're inviting it, they're luring it, they're encouraging it, they're celebrating it. And you know why? Because the people that are for this don't have to deal with the consequences of it. And that to them, let them all come in. Let's all be compassionate. Let everybody come in. Let's invite people to come in illegally. And they're all for it. Because that's an Arizona problem. That's a Florida problem. That's a Texas problem. That's a New Mexico problem. Until 48 people land in Martha's Vineyard. Then 48 people land. So, and look, I'm not claiming that we're going to be able to solve this thing 48 people at a time. But it was very revealing. I learned a lot. Here's what I learned. They land, 48 people land, 48 people. The state of Massachusetts declares a state of emergency. Immediately. And they mobilize 105, 112 National Guardsmen. So now we got a 2-to-1 ratio going of guardsmen. So then the laptop liberals of Martha's Vineyard, they open up some community center and they invite the cameras. Come see how compassionate we are. Because these are the people that have the signs on the yard. In this house, we respect science. You know that? I don't even know what all that sign says. You know the sign I'm talking about? Maybe they don't have too many of them around here, but I've seen them, guys. So they love this. They love to show the do-gooders and how kind and compassionate they are. And the cameras film everything. Look how we're taking care of them. We're giving toys to the kids that are here, all this. Okay. And then the cameras leave. And the next day they deport 48 people to Cape Cod. They deport them. But they slipped. Because when the cameras were there, they talked to a few people and they said, well, why can't they just stay here? And they're like, oh, no. We have a housing crisis in Martha's Vineyard. We have a housing crisis, We can't possibly tolerate it. But the hypocrisy is this. Yeah, it's very easy. If you're a laptop liberal living in one of these affluent communities far, far away, you don't have to deal with it. You probably live in a community that has a wall and a community that has a guard at the gate that asks you for your ID before you enter. They don't want you to have an ID for voting, but to go in their neighborhood, you must show ID. And so, the result of it is that you expose the hypocrisy. This needs to change. No country in the world can tolerate it. No country in the world would allow this. No country in the world does allow it. And we shouldn't either. And yet that's what this administration's done, and it's unabated. And it'll only continue. The third is crime, and we're blessed. Crime exists everywhere. And the crime in this country, there are cities that are unlivable hellscapes. It's not Mesa. I don't have to live there, but I hear it all the time. From people that used to work there. People are afraid to go into the city in New York, into Manhattan, because you don't know if some freak is going to jump out of an alley somewhere and attack you or push you into a subway or kill you. It happens all the time. And they're like, well, we don't know. This must be happening because, who knows why. I said, I know why. It's very simple. It's very, very simple. Crime has always existed, and that's why we had police departments and prosecutors and laws. But if you tell people the police department is evil, the prosecutors say we're not prosecuting anyone, and you have politicians like the border czar, Kamala Harris, raising money to bail people out when they torch police cars, you're going to have more crime. And that's what's happened, and it's ruined this country in many of these cities. And that's what they want for the country. That's what they want for America. We're never going to tolerate it. We're never going to allow it. We have to ensure that in this election, these people don't remain in power. And those are just 3 topics. We can go on to many others. Many others. We have a Democratic Party that's lost its bearings. I mean, they don't, for them, their definition of free speech is you are allowed to say whatever you want as long as we like it. If I don't like what you're saying, if I don't like how you're saying it, if I don't like who is saying it, then it's dangerous. It's disinformation. It's whatever you want to call it, it happens. And it's happening all the time everywhere. It's happening all the time everywhere. So that's why I tell people, look, this is not always popular when I say it because people would prefer, but I don't want to live in a one-party country. I never have. I think America is a stronger and better country when you have 2 common sense parties who have maybe one's to the left, one's to the right, but they both live in the realm of reality. But the not Democratic voters, I'm not going to do what Biden does, which is attack voters and my fellow Americans, because there are plenty of people that are registered Democrat, have always voted for Democrats, and they aren't crazy. And many of them are voting for us now because the other side is crazy. But the Democratic Party today, the Democratic Party in 2022 America is a party where the power and the influence resides in the hands of the laptop liberals, which I've already discussed with you, and the Marxist misfits. That's what they are. They are Marxist misfits. And they'll deny it. No Marxist ever admits they're a Marxist, except, Karl Marx probably did, but everybody, but they don't ever come in telling you that. But Marxism is about power and control. And I live surrounded by people that saw it with their own eyes and recognize it. And what Marxism is about controlling, Marxism tolerates no competition from any sector in the environment, any sector in the economy, and any sector in society. It doesn't tolerate it. It doesn't tolerate parents having more influence than the government. It doesn't tolerate families having more power than the government. It has to control what the schools teach. It has to control what the media reports or what people hear. It even changes the language and comes up with new words that never existed before. I've been exposed to this. Maybe I told the story yesterday. A couple years ago, some reporter says, how does it feel as a Latinx American? And I'm like, a what? Latinx. Honestly, and I felt like, oh, man, I'm not up to date. I'm like Googling on my phone, from the side. What is this Latinx? Because I thought maybe it was like a band, or some new rock band. Latinx is live this Sunday, but it's not. It's some term I've never used before. They make up their own language to describe all this stuff. And it's silly, but it's dangerous. They control the language. They control the narrative. It's infused itself into the corporate boardroom. We have major corporations in America today that bend over backwards for all this lunacy. Do you know how many millions of dollars they got stolen from them? They paid in protection money to a scam organization called BlackLivesMatter.com or whatever they were called. That group was a scam. The organization was a scam, a total scam. And all of these corporations gave them millions and millions of dollars. Millions and millions of dollars. And so it's the corporate class, it's the media, it's everything, every Hollywood actor, every celebrity, everyone just aligned against us. And you wonder, how do we even win elections? And the answer is because they're all crazy. And most people in America aren't crazy. And so they get to vote every 2 years. And that's what this is about at the end of the day. These people are lunatics, and they will destroy the country. If they were able to get it done, America would look like California. It would. I mean, because every policy they want for America, they've already implemented in California, every one of them. And you wind up with absurdities, complete absurdities. As an example, like right now, apparently, Napa Valley or whatever, they're now banning gas stations. They're not allowing any gas stations. So, are there any new gas stations from being built? They passed a law that by 2035 it will be illegal to buy a gas-powered car in California. And a few days later, they had to send out a text message to the whole state, do not charge your electric car. It's going to blow up our electric grid in California. So, this is the lunacy that we have to put up with. They want that for the whole country. They want it for the whole country, and it's not going to happen. We're not going to allow that to happen. And so that's what this election is really about. And it's about two things then. Number one is stopping it. And what I'm most excited about is that, God willing, we're in the majority in the House and Senate. It won't be because we just reelected a bunch of people. It'll be because in the Senate, we're actually going to have new people from Arizona, from Nevada, from Pennsylvania, from Ohio, from Georgia, from New Hampshire. New people who are, many of whom have never held office before, but have the energy and the drive and bring with them the real world energy that we desperately need so that we can stop bad things from happening. That's a big deal in the Senate. Because that way you don't have to wake up every morning hoping Joe Manchin didn't change his mind last night, and now they're going to pack the Supreme Court, take over our elections, and God knows what else. The second is make good things happen. And they say, well, how are you going to do that? I was asked that today. How are you going to do that? Joe Biden will just veto it. I said, he might. But if it's common sense and we win by enough, maybe enough of these Democrats will say, hey, maybe it's not a bad idea to drill for oil again. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to put criminals in jail. Maybe we should start talking again about things like, I don't know, enforcing our immigration laws. But assuming we can get it passed and put it then, people will know, okay, it didn't pass, but these are the people that wouldn't let it pass. Here's common sense. Here's what you want. We tried to pass it. They blocked it. We have an election in 24. Take it into account, because that's the final straw here, is to take back the White House. That's plan A. Now, plan B, if plan A doesn't work, plan B is we still pass these bills, but we pass them, a lot of them. And so now that we have all these bills sitting on Joe Biden's desk, and he signs them by accident, a couple of them, because he gets confused. Oh, this one, sir, is, and we're going to, that's plan B. And I don't think, we can maybe get 1 out of 10 in that way. Maybe more, it depends on the day. But the point is that's important. And the third is accountability. You know how much power resides in the hands of unelected bureaucrats whose names you've never heard? People that are there for 20, 30, 40 years. The pandemic revealed that to us. One guy, Dr. Fauci, had all that power to go on TV every day and tell us, by the way, different things. Like at the beginning, this, you got to do this, you got to do that. And throughout, just one person. But there are thousands of people like that in the government that you've never heard of, who every single day, the Congress passes laws, and then they get to apply the law as they interpret it. They make these decisions every day, and they're unaccountable to anybody. And there has to be oversight hearings. And so what I would do, if I'm not in the House, so we don't have one of these, but what I would recommend to my House members is, close down the January 6th Kangaroo Court Committee. Close that one down. And have a new committee on the riots of 2020 when they caused billions of dollars in damage and politicians were bailing people out of jails and encouraging this to happen. So let's have hearings on that. Let's have hearings on the over close to now 50 pro-life pregnancy centers in America that have been firebombed. I'm against political violence in America. I had one of my volunteers attacked. By the way, I tweeted out by 4 animals. And the press says, oh, no, it wasn't 4 animals. It was only 2. And then it comes out in the police report he was attacked by 2 thugs and their 2 German shepherds. So I was right the whole time. All right? I was right. They put German shepherds on the guy. They spent a week attacking the guy and not the victims. And not the victim of it. Because that's what they do. They meaning the local media. So anyway, they did that. But I'm against political violence. So let's have hearings on why and how language like what Schumer said, when you stand before the Supreme Court and threaten the Supreme Court, and then some guy gets on an airplane, flies to Maryland, and is captured outside the home of Kavanaugh, ready to murder him and maybe a couple other justices. Okay, that's real. Let's have hearings on that, and let's ask the FBI, where are these arrests? And by the way, where's the investigation on the Biden laptop thing? And where I promise you guys, can you imagine if that laptop had belonged to Don Jr. or somebody, maybe even like a 3rd cousin of Donald Trump, maybe a 4th cousin? It would have been, we would have had a 5-part CNN special, America under threat, corruption in America, but it's the double standard. But when that double standard gets a hold of the government, and here's the other one, guys. We just learned, because somebody did the investigation on it, Congress should have has the power to do it, and now will if we have a majority, to subpoena these records. And you learn that you have these people at Department of Homeland Security coordinating with the tech companies, having these meetings once a month about who are we going to label a liar, who are we going to have disinformation. Guys, do you know that a year and a half ago, if I stood here and said to you or put out a video saying, I think the virus could have come from a lab in China that would have taken down my post. Today, the consensus is that there's at least as good a chance that it came out of a lab accident as it did from some pangolin, whatever the hell a pangolin is. I've never seen a pangolin. But whatever a pangolin is, I think the lab that happens to be the leading lab in the world doing this kind of research is just as likely. And now the experts will tell you that. That would have gotten you knocked off. The Biden thing, the Biden laptop thing, they shut it down. I've never seen the media circle the wagon and say, we won't even report on it. We'll shut it down because of it. All this has to be looked at. All this has to be investigated. And this is not revenge. People think, oh, this is revenge, this is retribution. No, this is accountability. This is oversight. This is our job. That's what you're sending us there to do. So that's important. Because in the end, our responsibility is to leave our children what was left to us. I am under no illusions about where I live. And you know, I think I've lived here my whole life. I'm an American, born here. I know nothing but America. But I have been blessed with something other than being a U.S. citizen, which is an extraordinary blessing. I've been blessed to be raised by and around people that know what life is like in other places. And when you are raised by people, or when you are someone who knows what life is like in other places, you don't have time for silliness about how systemically evil America is or how terrible America is, because you know what terrible and evil looks like. And you understand is America, you know, like when they talk about our history, well, our history has blemishes. Yeah, nobody's history is perfect. I never said our history is perfect because our history was written by mortal men. Our history is not perfect. Our history is just better than anybody else's. By far, our history is better than anybody else's. You understand how blessed we are to live in a country where being an American in a lot of other places in the world, being whatever the name of that country is, that it's a race. It's a skin color. It's an ethnicity. It's a common lineage. In America, American is not a skin color. American's not a race. American is not an ethnicity. American is people from everywhere, from all over the world, who live and share this blessed land and have done an extraordinary thing for 240 years. An extraordinary thing that's inspired and changed the world. And continue to do so. You ever watch the Olympics? You watch the Olympics and these athletes go on the podium and you realize right away, you know, and I'm not saying this as my observation is there is an athlete from America representing virtually every other country we're competing against because their grandparents came here, their great-grandparents, their parents, whoever. That's an extraordinary thing. Now, there has to be rules for how you do it. There has to be a process. But that's an extraordinary achievement. But what's really extraordinary is that this country was founded on an idea that mankind had never heard about for 5,300 years of recorded history. No one had ever tried to run a country on the idea that you had rights that came from God, not from government. No one understood that. But this country was founded on that powerful principle. And it has spent 240 years perfecting it. Do you recognize that every single great movement in American history, every one, slavery ended, women got the right to vote, the end of segregation and organized discrimination and legalized discrimination, all of the progress was all built on the bedrock of someone demanding that we live up to our founding principles. Even Dr. King, when he gave his speeches, he would talk about live up to the promise of our Declaration of Independence and our founding. Not get rid of the Constitution, not pack the Supreme Court. That was the powerful principle upon all progress in this country. And it's extraordinary, and it's special, and it's worth fighting for and protecting. But it's not automatic, because the freedoms that are given to us from our Creator are natural, but they don't come natural to man. Man, because of its fallen nature, is inclined to tyranny. Mankind, because we are fallen creatures, are inclined towards trying to govern over others, the powerful over the weak, and tell people what to do. We saw that firsthand during the pandemic. There are people that were fired. There are people in our military that have lost their positions or are about to. There are people whose businesses were ruined because they wanted to tell people what to do. And we're not anarchists. We have to have rules. But we can't do that at the expense of our liberty that made our God-given rights possible. And so this is the nation that we now fight to preserve. And that's something that should unify all Americans. And it's worth fighting for and protecting, because if America is no longer the greatest nation on earth, and if what we lose here, if America is no longer special, because it is possible for America to continue to be a rich country and a powerful one, but not a special one. then we will be the first generation of Americans whose children and grandchildren did not inherit a country better than the one that was left to us. And I want no part of that. You want no part of that. Most of us want no part of that. And that's why we have to fight to ensure that people that don't understand that do not have their hands on the levers of power in this country. And that's what drives me. That's what drives me every single day. So at the end of the day, I say this to you. We love this country with all of our heart. It's a country worth fighting for. If you don't love America and you don't like it, you have the freedom to leave. You can leave. No one ever does. Well, except for like Hollywood actors that get on Twitter after they lose an election and they get all freaked out. I'm leaving America. I'm renouncing my citizenship. Nobody ever follows up on it, by the way. They never do. And the couple that did is because they didn't want to pay taxes, so they became citizens of the Bahamas or one of these tax havens. So, but they never leave. They never leave. I've never heard. Have you ever heard of a boatload of American refugees arriving in Cuba? I've never heard of it. Fugitives, maybe fugitives leave. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There's a bunch of people that stole money from Medicaid and Medicare that are hiding in Cuba, but not Americans that are seeking a better life like, oh, we're going to get on a raft and we're going to go somewhere else. It doesn't happen. And there's a reason for it. It's amazing. These people, you listen to them. America has so many problems. It's so evil. It's so bad. But somehow, 5,000 people a day break the law and try to get in here somehow to this horrible place. How ridiculous is that notion? So, but if they don't like it, they don't have to stay. We can't force anyone to be a part of it. I'm not asking them to leave. I'm just saying you're welcome to. And, well, I did ask some people to leave once. So I'll be honest with you. Well, here's what happened was that there was these protests in Cuba demanding liberty, and that scam Black Lives Matter organization put up on Twitter their support for the Castro evil regime. And I said, I am going to offer the assistance of my office to process the visas and immigration paperwork of any member of this group that would like to leave to Cuba. They haven't taken me up on it yet. Because first, the leader would have to sell the mansion she bought with the money from Nike. So anyway, going back to all of this that I'm saying, this is an extraordinary country and it's worth preserving and fighting for. And if you don't like it, you don't have to be here. But we're not going to let anyone destroy it. We're never going to allow anyone to destroy the greatest country in the history of the world. And that's what these elections are about. And we are blessed not just to live in a great country, but in a free one, where our voice is going to be heard. It's being heard now by voting. It'll be heard on Tuesday night. Let's win. Let's win big. Because when you win big, you send a message. And the message is this: we love America. You will not destroy it. We want common sense back in our politics. And we want to leave our children what our parents left for us, the greatest nation in the history of mankind. Thank you, guys. God bless.